town. Watch for more information about that. And then looking toward mid to late February, just save the date, February 17th to 19th, we are participating in our kind of first ever college ministries winter retreat. So we're partnering with Augustana and Wartburg for a retreat at Wartburg Seminary. Again, watch for more information, but just get those dates in your head. Today in chapel, we will be continuing to reflect on the Christmas and the Epiphany story, and so how these stories of the birth of Christ and the Magi continue and lead us in the work of faith and justice. And so that will be our focus today, and we are especially grateful for Tyler and for Nathan for sharing special music. As we begin now, I invite you to just get comfortable where you are. Feel free to stay seated at the moment, but roll out your shoulders or shake out your arms or roll your neck, whatever it is to help you feel relaxed and grounded. Know that you have permission to set down whatever it is that you have brought into this space. And just take a moment to breathe deeply and find your center. Arise and shine. God is in this place. The glory of the Lord has risen upon us. The glory of the Lord appears over us. The glory of the Lord is shown to the nations by the leading of a star. May we be led by faith to know God's presence in our lives and in our world. And may we at last come to the full vision of God's glory, which leads us in justice and in love, now and all our days. Amen. Our reading today is from Matthew chapter 2. Last week for Epiphany, we read the first 12 verses, which is the arrival of the Magi. And this is the back half of chapter 2. It is the rest of the story. On entering the house, the Magi saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their country by another road. Now, after they had left, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother by night, and went to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I have called my son." When Herod saw that he had been tricked by the Magi, he was infuriated, and he sent and killed all the children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had learned from the Magi. Then what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah, wailing and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be consoled because they are no more. When Herod died, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who were seeking the child's life are dead." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was ruling Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And after being warned in a dream, he went away to the district of Galilee. There he made his home in a town called Nazareth, so that what had been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. He will be called a Nazarene. As I said, this is the rest of the story. This is the part of the Christmas and Epiphany story that does not show up in Christmas pageants or picture books. We don't sing many Christmas carols about this part of the story, though there are at least a couple that we could sing. No, in general, we like to stick with all of the romantic parts of Jesus' birth story. We have spent the last week celebrating this sweet picture of the Holy Family being nuzzled at the elbows by curious sheep. We have heard the song of the angels in the fields. We have watched a star lighting a pathway for the Magi. We've celebrated babies and birth. And even if we go as far to at least acknowledge that everything about this story is a little bit messy and definitely unconventional, we still find a way in this season of tucking the messiness of barns and birth into this story that charms us, this story that seems like it has come to its conclusion when the Magi depart by another road after bringing their gifts to Jesus. We don't often read the second half of the story, but after the sheep and the stars, after the gifts, a sequence of very terrible things happen. We have a raging king in pursuit of his political rival who cares not a bit that this rival is a helpless infant, who is so wrapped up in his own fear and whose heart is so hardened by pride and whose desperate grabs at power make him so delusional that he orders the deaths of infants and children, an act of abject terror in the name of self-preservation. And then we have Joseph, who is led forward not by stars, but by a series of dreams. We have a Holy Family fleeing as refugees, escaping political violence, running for their lives, fearful of sitting kings and their descendants alike. This is not the story we want to be telling at Christmas time. This is the half of the story that is shocking and tragic and disturbing. A couple things I want to say about this. First, this difficult side of the story reminds us that Jesus' entire life and ministry is set against a backdrop of worldly power and all of the turmoil that it perpetuates. Jesus' birth is not just a nice spiritual event. It is not merely a theological event. It is a political reality. The incarnation, God becoming human, is something that fundamentally challenges the world order. It initiates an alternative kingdom to the one in which we currently live. The incarnation criticizes the marriage of wealth and power. It uproots philosophies of might makes right. It rejects political manipulation and greed and self-indulgence and exploitation and oppression. Both Jesus' birth and his death take place as parts of a deeply political story. And so this should affect how we interpret everything that happens in between. In Jesus' life, he heals, but it's not just about healing. And Jesus forgives, but it's not just about forgiveness. And Jesus reaches across boundaries, but it's not just about boundary crossing. Because all of these things, grounded from the moment of his birth, are things that are acts of resistance against a competing kingdom that says, put yourself first, or strive for earthly gain no matter the casualties, or kill your opponents, or nation first, or fear the other. And so similarly, our faith is also not just about gazing upon the baby Jesus in the manger, our hearts aglow. Our faith is not just about cozying up to God and seeking relationship with God and enlightenment as ends to themselves. Because we, like Jesus, live as citizens of this world, and our faith will always put us into conversation with the world around us. And our faith, therefore, will always be pushing us to seek a kingdom of healing and forgiveness and compassion and love, even when these things put us in conflict with the kingdoms that exist around us. And this is not for our sake, but for the sake of others and the whole of creation. Which leads me to the other thing I want to say about this story. The whole of the Christmas story, the lovely parts and the terrible parts alike. The whole thing is a story of God showing up on earth, living among us, experiencing our life, and redeeming all of it. But we need to notice exactly where it is that God shows up. Because God shows up in a barn in a forgettable small town, and God shows up as a fragile infant, and God shows up among shepherds and outsiders, and God is with the refugees. God is with grieving mothers. In this story, God does not show up in the palace or in the king's hall. God does not show up in the violence or in the robes of the king or of the king's son. God in this story always draws close to the places of frailty and the places of trauma and the places of uncertainty and fear. In this story, and in the whole story of our world, God comes to the places that most desperately need assurances of hope, and to places that need healing and comfort, and to the places that are least likely to catch the sympathies of aloof kings and self-centered rulers. These are the places to which we are called as well on God's behalf. If God shows up in the refugee, then we too are led by faith to care for and to advocate for migrants and travelers and asylum seekers. And if God shows up for grieving mothers, then we too are led by faith to sit with each other in the discomfort and unpredictability of grief. And if God shows up in the most fragile human form, then we too are led by faith to love and honor and protect and advocate for the ailing, the forgotten, the overlooked, the oppressed, the discriminated, all whose lives are most at risk, most fragile, least protected. See, this terrible back half of the Christmas story is actually the part of the story that reminds us what Christmas is all about. It gives us the why, because it tells us that Jesus was born into an ailing world, one desperately in need of hope and healing that he himself would offer. And it reminds us that Christmas is not so much a landing point for our seeking hearts, but rather a starting point. The back half of the story asks us to look up from our cookie tins and our twinkly lights and to see and remember that we also live in a broken world, that we are still trusting Jesus to help us put all the pieces back together. And so I want to close today with these words of poet Howard Thurman, entitled "The Work of Christmas." May these words bring life to this back half of the story, and may they be for us challenge and inspiration. When the song of the angels is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and princes are home, when the shepherds are back with their flock, the work of Christmas begins. To find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among others, to make music in the heart. Amen. We join in singing number 1060. And I mentioned there are at least a couple songs and carols that we can sing that do talk about this back half of the story. This is one of them. So 1060, and I invite you to stand. May God give us such faith and courage to be channels of God's grace, to be the ones who see one another in care and in love, to be people of welcome and resistance and wholehearted faith. Amen. Go now in peace. Follow the star. Thanks be to God.